I've been talking a whole lot about clarity recently, and I've been naming all of its greatest things and how amazing it is and how much it's done for me personally and what it's done for my growth. But are there any costs? Today we're going to be talking about the cost of clarity, because believe me, there are some. And I'm sure you've probably heard anything worthwhile in this world is going to be hard to attain. It's not going to be an easy ride. So today we're going to delve a little bit into what cost you might have to pay for your clarity. There is a moment or moments where clarity reveals itself to us. And in those moments, or in that moment, confusion starts to dissipate. But what does that really mean? What cost do we pay? So confusion's left us, and all we have left now is clarity. Some might say that leaves us with a responsibility. For some, that's quite a hard thing to take on. There's a saying whereby once you've seen the truth, you can never go back. You want to take the red pill or the blue pill. If you take that red pill, you can never go back. And that is essentially what this is. Once clarity hits you, it's hard to unsee it. Maybe it's even impossible. And that is the cost that I'm going to be talking about today. So I like to describe confusion or potentially ignorance as a bit of a barrier. It's a bit of a sheath. It's something that we can hide behind. It's a cover. But once that cover is unveiled and we are now clear and we can see clear as day, we can no longer hide. We have to face the storm bare. So there's many occasions in this life where clarity can kind of hit us and our confusion or ignorance is taken away. Because it's fine if we don't know something, right? If we're not fully aware, we don't know what we don't know after all. But once you know, you have a responsibility from then on to take care of it and address the situation. As an example, if you've been meaning to get into the gym and you've been struggling and you haven't been quite sure as to why, or you're trying to lose weight and you've been going to the gym regularly and you think you're eating okay, and then all of a sudden a friend or work colleague points out the one thing that has actually been drawing you back. You've been eating a box of Snickers or this box of Pringles every night. Once that truth has been shown to you, you can no longer ignore it. And if you do, you're gonna feel this, maybe a tightness in your chest, a frustration. It's gonna feel misaligned. You're gonna be like, why? You know the reason as to what is preventing you from losing weight. And the only thing that is going to get rid of that feeling is by addressing that situation and stop eating the way that you have been. Another example could be a career that you've potentially outgrown. You've been telling yourself over and over, you've been productive with things that you never thought you'd be productive with. Like you got around to that final project at home that you've been meaning to do for like the last 5 years. This is you distracting yourself. And then one morning, doesn't have to be any particular morning, but one morning you've opened up your laptop, you've just arrived at the office, and you get this tight feeling in your chest. And it's not from stress, but it's from misalignment. And then it hits you. I don't want to build this life anymore. That moment there is clarity. And once it's hit you, you can no longer ignore it. You can't pretend to know otherwise. And if you do, it's going to cause you a lot of resistance and a lot of frustration. So take note of it and act on it. Receiving clarity forces us to face truths that can be very uncomfortable. I say lean in to that uncomfortable feeling and overcome it. That's where growth lives. Get used to being uncomfortable. I think an important topic to touch on here as well when it comes to receiving clarity is to make the distinction between not wanting to know something and actually just not knowing something. With not wanting to know something, you're going to be very dismissive, you're going to be very defensive, and you're probably going to feel very uncomfortable whenever this topic is brought up. If you notice that in yourself around particular situations, topics, people, you should address that. And you should really try to uncover the reason as to why it makes you uncomfortable and why you don't want to know. What truth is being shown to you that you don't want to know about yourself? What makes it so uncomfortable that you don't want to actually overcome it? Would you rather stay where you are? Or would you rather just be uncomfortable for a little while and actually overcome the thing? Sure, it might take one or two hard conversations with that person. Sure, it might take you looking into yourself and actually accepting the fact that you are lazy for once. And with not knowing something, this is where you actually learn. So if something is brought up to you that you weren't aware of and you weren't sure of, or you had no idea about, this is the chance for you to actually learn something new. So take it on board. And then from there, you can form your own opinion. You can disagree with it or you can agree with it. That is up to you and your use of discernment. Why do we use busyness, productivity, and goals to avoid the truth? I believe all things in this world follow the path of least resistance when not actually taken a hold by our own hands. So if you're left to your own devices with no intention, no direction, no clarity, you would follow the path of least resistance. And I believe this is one of the forms that it takes on. So we stay busy to avoid discomfort. We are wired to avoid discomfort and pain, which makes sense, right? But sometimes discomfort and pain can actually mean progression. It's a very easy way to rationalize our behavior in avoiding the truth sometimes. You know, it's very easy to say, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be productive. You know, I'm learning. Oh, you know, I am going to the gym, but you're not addressing the actual truth that you've been faced with, which can hinder us in the long term sometimes. So it's always important to kind of like note, take your time and really understand what is going on. What is the world trying to show you right now? What are your friends trying to show you? Your partners? Is there truth in what they say? And why are you trying to avoid it? And what are you avoiding it with, furthermore? I've used the term productivity very, very lightly here, and I just want to readdress this. Being busy and being productive isn't necessarily the same thing, so I should use the term more carefully. You know, us being very busy, you know, we can look productive on the outside, but it doesn't really serve us much purpose for our future. It drowns us in noise. You know, it doesn't allow us to process what's really going on. When was the last time that you actually took a second to think about what you did today, for example? You know, what happened earlier while you're stuck in traffic? Someone cut you up and you got a bit frustrated. Did you take a second to even think about that earlier, to just let it through, to let it pass? Or did you just hide it behind like everything else? It's worth thinking about. You know, there's so many things that happen on a day-to-day basis. There's so much information that we take in every day. You know, our phones, the people that we speak to, especially for working quite a civil job, the service industry, we're speaking to literally hundreds of people daily. That's hundreds of interactions daily. So many words, so many conversations, and every little thing could cause some sort of stir of emotion in us. You know, it's particularly the bigger ones where we do notice that we do get a bit frustrated, that we are a bit over it. You know, so maybe someone might make us angry. Maybe we've received a text from a family member or a friend or a partner to make us upset. Vice versa, even with the positive things. Did you take a second to celebrate today when your friend said, oh my God, like I released a new video today. They've reached a new milestone, that you've reached a new milestone. Did you take a second to even celebrate? There's so many things that go on a day-to-day basis that we never really process. This can be noise too, if not dealt with correctly. What noise does is it allows us to escape ourselves, the self that comes with great reason. So stop drowning them out. They have the truth. We've spoken about a few examples about what clarity can reveal for you. But what behaviors or patterns does it reveal within us once we finally stop avoiding that truth? I want to make this very clear as well. This is not a name and blame situation here. I don't want you to go looking at your lives thinking, oh my God, I've been this, I've been that, and I can't believe that I was, and be ashamed. No, all this simply means, once clarity hits, all this simply means is that you've outgrown a version of yourself. And once that clarity hits, again, now it's your responsibility to grow. So what clarity actually reveals are all of your behaviors and patterns that you've outgrown. These are the things that no longer serve a purpose in your life, which is why you feel so much resistance and frustration when you go to ignore them, because it isn't really you anymore. But you keep doing it anyway because it's your habit or it's your pattern. You've been doing this daily for however long. And here's where things get really uncomfortable. That uncomfortable feeling is clarity exposing the gap between what we say we want and what we actually choose. If you say you want something and you're continuously choosing something else, you start to look at yourself a little differently, and that can be quite difficult. But you have a choice. You can change. But how does clarity actually do this? From my experience, it's incredibly blunt. It's almost like a sudden realization of, how did I not see this sooner? And I think there are varying levels to this. Depending on how receptive you are to wanting to change, it's going to come in different waves and different forms. I feel like if you're at the beginning of this sort of journey where you have been fighting your clarity and your truths and you've been in that resistance for a little while, then from my experience, it's something that you have to yourself initiate and come to the realization of. It's something that you have to see for yourself to be like, oh, that's what I was doing. Okay, I understand now. As opposed to someone else making an observation for you and pointing out, let's say, a flaw between your intent and action. So you might intend to go to the gym and train and be healthy, but what you're actually doing is, and choosing to do, is eat unhealthy foods. So sometimes accepting clarity from someone else is quite hard to accept. Just being aware of the resistance that you have to certain behaviors and patterns that you have is step number one, and I feel like it's the most vital towards actually beginning to change. And if you did watch my previous video, any sort of transformation that you undergo, you must embody that change now. And then from here on, we become better at discerning information. We're able to take on board what others say, and we can form an opinion. Do we agree? Do we disagree? You won't be so quick to judge or be defensive or be dismissive purely for the fact that they're pointing out something about you, potentially, you know. So again, it's up to you to decide whether or not it's true, if it holds weight, or if it's false. And if you disagree with it and it doesn't apply to you, that's also okay as well. But don't be so quick to judge and be defensive. The information that's being put out to you could actually help you. It could actually serve to be the next step in your progression or your evolution. It might just be that one final piece that you needed to get you to where you actually want to go. The key here is to not allow pride or ego to react for you. You want to respond in kind. You want to respond in the way that you see best. Let's dig a little bit deeper and really look at the emotional cost of clarity. So why is it that clarity feels so heavy? I believe that simply be down to the fact that it becomes your responsibility. You find out a truth and you ignore it, it's going to weigh heavy on your mind. And when something isn't addressed, particularly in an aligned manner, so something respective to you and how you would personally deal with it, it takes up mental space. It becomes very, very difficult. It's always going to be in the back of your mind. We spoke a little bit earlier about processing things and never having the time to process. This now becomes another thing to have to process at some point. But because it's a bit more substantial, it takes up a little bit more mental real estate. Hence the feeling of it feeling heavy. It's that responsibility, our call to actually address the issue properly, which is what causes that emotional distress or that emotional cost. So what parts of ourselves must we sacrifice in order to outgrow that old identity? I've narrowed it down to 6 things. Beliefs, or in particular, beliefs that hold us back. Beliefs that no longer serve the person that we're trying to become. Our perspective, it must change to a perspective that suits our new purpose. Our focus, an incredibly important one. Where we place our focus is everything. It's where our energy goes. How we react. If you continuously react in the way that your old identity did, it's going to be something that holds you back, an old habit, an old pattern. It's a pattern that must change with the person that you're becoming. Our expectations also must change. Something that we might have expected from ourselves previously might no longer matter, or in fact, the standard or the bar might be far too low. Our expectations of what we receive from the world also must change. You must know that there is an abundance in this world. You must know that there's so much good out there. If you focus on a negative outcome, more than likely that negative outcome will come to pass. And finally, our own self-concept, how we view ourselves, what we think of ourselves. At the end of the day, you are what you think. Why do we say we want change but yet resist it anyway? We resist the truths that would actually allow the transformation to happen. We come up with excuses like, it takes a lot of energy, we're too tired, we haven't got enough time. We're fearful of what might actually happen when we do change. You know, it could be fear of success, fear of failure, fear of being seen. It could even be a lack of conviction, a lack of belief in your own self. You might even feel guilty. That could be related back to your self-concept that we touched on a little bit earlier. And to take it a little bit further, the cost of that clarity could be even more demanding. And it's those demands that clarity requires that makes it so uncomfortable. First, you have to be completely honest with yourself and also act on it as well. Because if you don't, you're going to get that resistance, that misaligned feeling, that tightness in your chest. And then once the clarity's been given, you now have a new direction, right? And that direction, it could literally take you in any direction. It could be the complete opposite way you've been going up until this point. And that alone is such a daunting thing. It requires such tremendous amount of conviction and belief in your own self. To be able to make a 180 pivot in your life and have belief that it's going to be okay, it takes a lot. I understand. So one is making the change, and then two, to actually follow through and do what you feel like you're meant to do, you know, through all of the good times as well as the bad times. It's not easy. Now, there is a freedom inside the discomfort. So what becomes possible when we stop negotiating with our excuses? In short, everything becomes possible. We are our own worst enemy. Because at the end of the day, what we think and what we believe is true. So when you do finally stop negotiating with those excuses and you step into that discomfort and reveal what clarity was trying to tell you, what that truth was trying to tell you, it causes a major shift throughout our life. Right down to our decisions, our relationships, and even our mind. So not only do you make better decisions for you, you make them faster, you gain a surety like no other. I can't quite explain the level of conviction that you have in your words, in your actions, when you follow through on the clarity that you receive. It's incredible. If I was to describe this in another way, all clarity is doing, or all truth is doing, is making you more you. It's drowning out the noise that has been covering you up all of this time. And obviously this happens repeatedly over the course of our life because we're always changing. So when you are working with the truth and truth alone, and you stepped into this discomfort to become clear, your relationships with people become a lot stronger, they're genuine, and there's overall just no confusion because people know exactly where they stand with you. What you say, what you do, and how you act all become way more coherent. They start to meld to one. And that's a clear message to everyone. We spoke briefly about mental real estate. That starts to declutter. And now you've got more room for more beneficial things in your life. And most importantly, at the end of it all, it becomes a steady foundation for you. You become able to stand still without having to judge. You become a quiet and confident place. You find peace within yourself. And at the end of the day, isn't that the goal everyone really wants to achieve? To just be at peace? I'm a very organized and methodical person, so I like structure. For me personally, my biggest question when it comes to things like this is, how can I sustain this? How can I make this repeatable? How can I act on this, day in and day out? I believe we need a system to hold this clarity, to make better use of it. We don't want to just let it wisp away. I briefly mentioned before how everything in this world follows the path of least resistance if we let it. And in accordance with this is entropy. Now, entropy is a fundamental concept in physics. And it essentially means this: everything in this world moves towards disorder. So just to help visualize this, imagine your room You've just cleaned it, it's tidy, it's organized, everything is where it should be. Over time, your room will get more messy unless you put enough energy into it to keep it organized and clean. If you just let time go by itself without any sort of intervention, it will naturally become more disorderly, more messy, more dirty. We must feed the system, we must give it energy in order to overcome that entropy. So just take your room. It's very easy for it to get messy, but on the flip side, it takes a lot of energy to clean up. So the entropy is very high in your room. So why do I bring up entropy? Why am I talking about this thing? Because any system is going to be under this law of entropy, under this fundamental concept, which means in order for us to overcome entropy, we must pour energy into a system to prevent us from becoming more disorderly, more messy. And this is exactly why Regime was built. Again, I'm very orderly. I like frameworks, I like systems, I like to be able to repeat certain things. So Regime is here to prevent us from slipping back into old unconscious patterns. And it does this by making the unconscious conscious, and then making us see where taking action is necessary. I have just a few closing reflections from my own personal experience, and also something I would like to ask you guys as well. What would our lives look like if clarity became a daily practice instead of just some rare event? I think this is incredibly fun to think about. I want you to get really creative with it. Take your time, try practicing it today, and just see where it takes you, see what unfolds. And I'd love to hear about it as well, so put it down in the comments, send me a DM on Insta. And I mean, if you're lucky enough to have my number, then drop me a call as well. And second, another question. One that I'd like you guys to answer before I answer as well. So maybe pause this video and think about your answer. But the question is this: why is the cost of clarity always less than confusion? For me, clarity is expensive, yes, but confusion charges interest. That compounds quickly. But the return on investment from the clarity, so yes, the initial expense is high, that discomfort that we was talking about, but the return on investment that you get back, it's like none other. If we're talking about compounding effect, this is way greater than even the interest that you're charged in terms of confusion. So for me, it's a no-brainer. But again, I would love to hear some of your answers and what your takes are on some of the things that I've spoken about today. And as usual, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with anyone that you might find it will resonate with. With clarity, I'll see you guys soon.